Season 11, Episode 2, Heavy Lifting Analysis. In last night's episode, Heavy Lifting, our favorite blacksmith, Carmen Legg, was invited to the Interpretive Center to give his opinion on some artifacts that were unearthed on Lot 5. Carmen was shown 5 objects that were presented on the table, but we only hear about 3 of them during the telecast. Objects 1, 3, and 4, in the attached photo, were discussed in last night's episode. Objects 2 and 5 were omitted from the conversation. The first object shown to Carmen was called an iron latch, although in last week's episode, archaeologist Laird Niven identified it as a river raft spike. Carmen inspected the piece and asked to see the CT scan for more details. His opinion was that the piece was some sort of wedge that was driven into wood for one-time usage. He suspected that it could have been used to hold horses or oxen together, bundling of wood lumber together, or used as a sort of hoist or pulley. This last possibility launched the speculation of the William Phipps theory of the Conception treasure being buried on Oak Island. Laird added the fact that Phipps was known to be in Nova Scotia. There was a long-lasting border dispute between the British and French indigenous peoples in New England that resulted in ongoing raids and massacres that were extremely violent, brutal, and deadly in the 17th and 18th centuries. The major site of these ongoing conflicts occurred in present-day Maine. After back-and-forth conflicts, in March 1690, French and indigenous forces attacked Falmouth in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is present-day Portland, Maine. The British settlers were all massacred. In retaliation, a raid was planned by the British colonists to take Port Royal in Acadia, Nova Scotia. A major general was sought to lead the expedition. William Phipps volunteered to lead the expedition. Phipps was thought of as a hero because he had helped evacuate British settlers from the war-ravaged area and saved their lives. He had some naval experience, once being in charge of a naval gunship. He was famous for his treasure hunting operations some years previously. In April 1690, Phipps led a very large force of 700 men with 7 ships to Port Royal, the capital of Acadia. The French forces only had 70 men guarding the fort with limited weapons. The fort was in the process of being dismantled because a new one was being planned. A peaceful surrender was negotiated. After Phipps came to the fort, he learned that the French had been moving valuables and stores that were supposed to go to his colonial forces. This angered Phipps, and he withdrew from the terms of the surrender. He allowed his men to sack the fort, plunder the town, destroy the fort's chapel, take private property, kill livestock, and force Acadians to take an oath of allegiance to the British king. Phipps returned immediately to Boston, where he was celebrated as a hero. At this documented time of Phipps being in Nova Scotia, he did not visit Oak Island and bury any treasure. His sole purpose was the sacking of Port Royal. Later that year, he would lead another assault, this time on Quebec. There is speculation that Phipps may have been at New Ross at some point because the Knight of the Garter medallion of Christopher Monk was found there. It's speculated that perhaps Monk gave it to Phipps after his retrieval of treasure from the Conception, because Monk was his major investor. The theory has not been confirmed with any evidence that pinpoints Phipps physically being in New Ross or on Oak Island. How did the iron wedge spike get to Oak Island? It's very possible it made its way there from trade or possible military acquisition by the French. It's also possible that the date of the spike is older than the 1600s, and being a widely used object of the time with a variety of uses, it was most likely brought there by colonists. The next object shown to Carmen is what Gary identified as an iron fastener with a rose head top. Carmen examined the object and looked at the CT scan and believes that it was a broken part of a tool, specifically a chisel that may have been used in tunneling or digging. The final object that was discussed was what Gary thought was a decorative strap that would be found on a box or chest. After Carmen's inspection, he concurred with Gary's identification, but added that it was a bow tie strap, and he thought it was of French origin. This led him to say he thought that it is indicative of the French being on Oak Island first. Also, in the episode during the excavation on Lot 5 at the Circular Depression, archaeologist Jamie Kuba finds a piece of pottery called Anglo-American ware. Laird added that the pottery was British and may have originated in the British colony of Pennsylvania in the 1770s. This makes perfect sense because most of the early lot owners of Oak Island were New England planters. That is where they came from, and it's very logical that they would have objects that originated from New England that they either brought with them or acquired through trade. There have been many artifacts from the 1750s to 1770s that have been found, which are indicative of the New England planters' activity on the island. It was also very common that you would find both British and French items in both sides' possession through trade or war. Updates on these specific artifacts will be examined in future Artifact Alley reports. Please visit http://www.theoakislandcompendium.com for the entire article and more information. Good day from the compendium. Daniel and Charlotte.